Have you ever stopped and wondered, what does it actually mean to be human? Well, for thousands of years, one single powerful idea has offered a really compelling answer. Today, we're going to unpack that idea, what some have called our original blueprint. Seriously, what makes us us? Where does our value come from? Is it something we earn? To even start finding answers, we've got to explore a foundational concept, this idea of an original design for what it means to be human. Okay, let's dive right into this original design. To really get a handle on the blueprint, we have to go way back to the beginning, to a core idea right out of the book of Genesis. It's a Latin phrase you might have heard, imago Dei. It literally means the image of God. And this one concept, well, it's the bedrock for everything else. You could think of it like the source code that gives every single human life profound value, dignity, and a purpose. Now, you have to realize how absolutely radical this was for its time. See, in the ancient world, it was usually just the kings or the priests who were seen as having this kind of divine spark. But this text makes it crystal clear from page 1. This status belongs to everyone. Male and female, no exceptions. It's a universal declaration of human worth. But, okay, what does being an image actually mean? Scholars and theologians have wrestled with this for centuries, and their ideas generally fall into these three main buckets you see here. Is it something inside of us, like our ability to reason? Or is it all about our capacity for relationships? Or maybe it's a job we're given, a role to play. The truth is, it might just be a beautiful mix of all three. But of course, the story doesn't stop there. The biblical narrative goes on to explain that this perfect original blueprint, it got damaged. Something went terribly wrong with the design and its execution. The contrast here is just stark. You couldn't paint a clearer picture. We go from a world that's described as very good, a state of total harmony, to one that is fundamentally broken, corrupt. So the big question is, what happened? Well, according to the story in Genesis 3, the turning point was a really simple but profound temptation: to redefine reality on our own terms. It was a choice to basically seize the controls and decide for ourselves what's good and what's evil, stepping into a role that just wasn't meant for us. And here's the fallout. The struggle turns inward. Instead of ruling the world around them in harmony, humanity now has to fight this destructive force inside of us. This verse paints this incredible picture of it, like a predator crouching at the door. And this internal battle, well, it causes fractures everywhere, in our relationship with God, with each other, and even with the planet itself. But the story doesn't end in brokenness, not at all. The entire narrative pivots toward a solution, a way to restore that original blueprint. It introduces a perfect model of what the imago Dei was always supposed to look like. This famous line from the Gospel of John, of course, refers to Jesus Christ, and he's presented as more than just a great teacher. He's shown as the perfect embodiment of humanity, the true, complete image of God in human form, living out the blueprint exactly as it was designed. So here's the crucial contrast. The story of the first Adam is all about grabbing for autonomy, for control, and it leads to alienation. But the story of Christ, sometimes called the second Adam, is one of perfect relational trust and obedience, and that leads to reconciliation. He's modeling the restored relationship. And this whole journey, from alienation all the way back to reconciliation, is just powerfully illustrated in one of Jesus's most famous stories. Let's break it down. The story of the prodigal son basically maps out this entire theological arc for us. It kicks off with rebellion, demanding what's his and turning his back on his father. That, of course, leads to ruin and total desperation. But then you have the turning point, a moment of clarity, of repentance, that leads to this absolutely shocking reconciliation. And this right here, this is where the story gets really wild. For a respected patriarch in that culture to hike up his robes and run, that would have been completely humiliating. This one action is such a powerful symbol of a divine love that's willing to abandon its own dignity to welcome a lost child home. This son's return wasn't about earning his way back. He had this whole speech prepared to beg for a job as a servant, but his father doesn't even let him finish. The restoration is based purely on the father's grace, healing that broken relationship that's at the very heart of the imago Dei. So what does it actually look like to live as a restored image bearer? How does this theological blueprint really apply to our day-to-day lives? This verse completely reframes the idea of suffering. From this perspective, hardship isn't just random or some kind of punishment. Instead, it's seen as a form of loving, corrective training. You know, like a father helping a child he loves to grow up and mature. And there's actually a specific theological word for this lifelong process of being restored and remade into the original blueprint. It's called sanctification. It's the journey of becoming more fully human, as defined by the perfect human, Jesus. The Apostle Paul uses this really great metaphor of clothing. He says it involves actively putting off the old, corrupted self with all its destructive patterns and putting on a new self, one that's being constantly renewed in the Creator's image. And this framework from the Gospel of Matthew gives a super practical, actionable example of what this looks like. When relationships break, there's a clear process for handling the conflict that's designed to preserve the relationship, not to just win an argument. And this brings us right back to that core principle we saw with the prodigal son. The goal isn't to win, or to prove you're right, or to punish someone. The goal always is to mend what's been broken. Reconciliation is the end game. So all of this leaves us with a final thought to chew on. If every single human being is created in the image of God, a divine blueprint that was marred but is now in the process of being masterfully restored, how does that change the way we see ourselves? And how does it change the way we see the value and the potential in every single person we meet?